Radio, the unique internet broadcast series that brings you together with some of the most amazing, important, and interesting individuals from the worlds of business, industry, travel, art, and entertainment, from company owners, CEOs, and presidents, to the technical wizards behind the scenes who create the magic that make their company's products and services so special. Here is your opportunity to hear firsthand the fascinating stories of how it all happened from those who actually made it possible. This is Close Up Talk Radio. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Close Up Talk Radio. I'm Doug Llewellyn. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. We're going to talk about issues that prevent a business organization or companies, individuals, from reaching their full potential. And we're going to do this with an extraordinary consulting firm headquartered in Houston, Texas. Cloud-Rainosek Associates is the organization. They are a consulting firm that specializes in transforming organizations and individuals alike through positive change in their culture and their leadership. This company is led by Jackalyn Rainosek, who is a PhD with 39 years of experience in counseling psychology, and her partner Liz Cloud, a CPA with 36 years experience in corporate management. Together, they identify behavioral patterns of employees within an organization and determine how best to center their lives and activities for the good of the organization. It's a real pleasure to have both our guests with us, Jackalyn Rainosek and Liz Cloud. Good morning, ladies. Nice to have you here. How are you?
Good morning.
Very good. You sound great. All right, let me try and throw questions individually out, and we will go through this. Let me start with you, Jackalyn. Do me a favor and explain a little bit of what Cloud-Rainosek Associates really is all about. Describe yourself for me.
Okay. We are a consulting firm that really looks at habitual patterns that destroy organizational systems. The habitual patterns can also destroy families or, teams or groups of individuals, and it impacts individuals. And we've been studying this since 1991 and have an online 17 behavioral grouping assessment where we really can assess people and find out what individually they're contributing to the problems they have, as well as we can go into organizations and assess it. Another thing is we get them emotionally connected to those behaviors, and then we can help them to change them. And we also are very good at leadership. And we both happen to be certified master facilitators with Jim Kuz's and Barry Posner's work. So we combine a number of things about leadership and about developing oneself and really looking at habitual patterns.
All right, a quick question here, because we've talked about, you reference organizations, companies, and individuals alike. When you talk about individuals, are these like owners of individual companies? Are they all? Is it always a business situation, or not necessarily?
We've worked with both sides. We work with people who have personal issues, but we primarily work with people also who have business issues. And we tend to start in with the president or the CEO of the company, the executive team, and then we move down. Now, sometimes an executive will refer an individual to us that they want us to specifically work with one individual. It may be a supervisor, it may be a manager, or an executive.
Okay. All right, Liz, explain to me how the two of you formed and got together. When did that happen?
Well, as Jackalyn said earlier, this work really started back in 1991, and at the time we were both in a women's group. We're indicating that we believe in personal growth. Both of us were working on ourselves, and it transformed into us working together. Jackalyn had been the facilitator of the group, and at one point she asked me to facilitate one of our weekend experiences that we do, and it's been history since then, since we worked well together, and we decided to go into business together.
And what are the kinds of companies and organizations that you find, are primarily your clients? Are they, you're in Houston, Texas. I think I pointed that out. Obviously, a lot of big oil giant companies like that are in the Houston area. Do you deal with companies like that, or are they smaller, small businesses?
We deal with both. Usually in the larger corporations, what ends up happening is that we work with specific business units or departments. For instance, we have done some work within the city, and it'll be a certain area of the city, not the whole city itself. We also work with family-owned businesses, and we also work with the medium-sized firm. So it's all of the above, and we address whatever their issues are that they want to do. So we do a needs assessment with them to define what it is that they want to accomplish.
Jackalyn, how did you guys identify the kind of niche that you thought you could best serve when you decided to really form, your associates?
Well, I think that we both realized that there were some things that were not being covered in the business world. Liz has lots of experience as a corporate executive, and I was always the external consultant. And that's what makes us a really valuable team because we have different kind of perspectives about things. But I think that we decided that it didn't matter what size the company was or what type it was, that all of our companies currently have habitual patterns that destroy their employees' ability to function. And I think one of the things we realized is that as the years went on, we saw a lot of consulting work happening in organizations, but they had failed to address the habitual patterns. And so it's interesting how we get our clients. It's by word of mouth, recommendations. And so that's how it emerged.
And when you say habitual patterns that you guys have discovered, I don't mean to refer you guys, I'm sorry. But anyway, the habitual pattern, what are we talking about?
Well, I think there are a number of things. There are things, our habitual patterns assessment covers many things. It covers not only what you eat, what you drink, what you do, but it also covers a lot of behavior patterns. And what we see often in organizations is there is a high need for control. That then impacts the way that people do their work. We have people who habitually mismanage themselves. We call them bureaucratic obstructionists. And we can identify those and either assist them or that we can maybe they'll leave the company because they don't like the changes that are occurring in the company. Another thing that we see is that people, and it's not just women. I think women are typed as being nice, but we see people that are so polite and so want to be liked by other human beings, they have a hard time really working with and supervising people because they don't have good boundaries. Sometimes they get overinvested in the relationships, but one of the ones that we see so frequently now because of the corporate anorexia that we have going on where people are having to do more for less, is that people are working themselves to death, and then that has an impact on the way they interact with other people.
You talk about people wanting to be nice. Is that bad in the company, to want to be nice?
No, it's not. What we say, though, is that we want people to be emotionally connected to other human beings, and when somebody's really nice, sometimes they're really lying and not telling the truth and not telling they're not telling what they need to say to the individual because they're so concerned about, taking care of someone else's feelings.
So we say to people, offend somebody. Is that what it is?
I'm sorry?
They don't want to offend somebody.
That's correct. And when they get invested in that, then it becomes an habitual pattern that's not helpful.
Very interesting. Obviously, there are lots of habitual patterns that you have discovered. I know you have the 17 self-assessment area. Is that what that would include, the various kinds of habitual patterns you've discovered?
Yes, that's Jackalyn's given an example of several of the areas. So what we do is it's an online assessment, and what we do is make available the link to the survey so that an individual can go in. It's a self-assessment, so they can go in and answer the questions. Once they've completed that, then we generate a report that we then go over with the individual so that they can see what they've told themselves, basically. As I said, it's a self-assessment, so they're not telling themselves anything new. It simply helps to see it in a form that they can decide then which actions that they might want to take to improve themselves.
Well, let's talk about these self-assessment areas. What are they? Can we go through them?
Sure.
Liz?
Sure, we can go through them. We do separate out what is the difference between a substance and a process behavior. And what we mean by that is that in a substance, it's anything that is ingested in the body. So it can be food, it can be someone who smokes, it can be alcohol, it can be any of those types of things. some sort of drug, that any of these that might be overused that impact somebody's ability to perform in day-to-day life. And then the other areas that most people are not familiar with would be anything that's a daily process in our lives. So, for example, when we're talking about, Jackalyn mentioned anorexia earlier before, there's food anorexia, which we're all familiar with. There's a lot produced out there in the news and on shows, etc. However, there's also what we call emotional, relationship, and social anorexia that occurs within an individual and within an organization. This might be the individual that withdraws or keeps things to themselves. They can create bottlenecks within a corporation since they won't share the work or share their ideas or let people know what's going on. So that's an area that we can talk about. Mm-hmm. Jackalyn mentioned earlier about the habitual mismanagement of self. We call these individuals bureaucratic obstructionists, since what they do is that a typical behavior is that they'll get people to take their side, or it'll be the person that it's all or nothing. They may create drama around a crisis situation or create a situation into a crisis. We even talk about clutter and disorganization. You know, it's that person that's continually late to meetings, or they can't find things on their desk, even though they say that they can put their hands on it, but it takes them 15 minutes to do it. We also talk about control. You know, it says those are the individuals that want to do it my way. They may listen to suggestions, but they end up doing it however that they were planning to do it in the first place. We talk about issues around money and finances. We talk about gambling. There are ways to gamble both individually, which we're familiar with. You know, it's the poker games or that sort of thing. But it's also gambling with company assets. Maybe there's an individual that takes too many risks and puts the corporation in a situation that there's some liability that could be easily attached. We can talk about, we mentioned that about being nice.
Yeah.
Which we can probably talk about that in the future. That's always a topic for conversation.
Okay.
And we also talk about self-doubt, where people take too much time to double-check themselves. They may hold up a process. They may not give themselves recognition for the talents that they have. And then we talked about the work before.
Let me mention something, and I can give maybe a more human connection to an habitual pattern. A man called me from a regional office here, and he said that he had a supervisor, a manager, who had 109 people under him. He had 5 direct reports, and nobody liked him. And yet, he was a good administrator. Now, there's a big difference between administration and management or leadership. And so what happened was when the man called me, I went in to see him. I happened to know from his behavior patterns that the man had described to me that he was very emotionally disconnected. He was isolating himself. He was very aloof, and people found him to be extremely distant. Yeah. And we have this 17 behavioral grouping inventory, but we also have inventories for the specific groups of behaviors that we have. So I took my emotional relationship and social anorexia longer version of the assessment, and I literally, what happened was I went in and started talking to him, and I said, well, would you mind looking at this assessment for me and seeing if anything fits you? And he did, and he looked at it, and he started crying. And I said, well, I hope I haven't offended you. And he said, just wait a minute. And I waited a minute, and then he said to me, every one of these behavior patterns you've described, nobody's ever been able to talk to me. I've been to a number of professionals. Nobody's ever told me what could happen, and can you help me? Because these are the behaviors I need to change. And I said, yes, I can help you. And he was a wonderful man to work with. He later moved from Houston to San Antonio, and I know has done very well. But he just didn't know how to relate to people, and that's what we were able to do with him. So that's an example of maybe a story that we've done with a particular habitual pattern.
How does it normally happen? What causes a company executive, be it the CEO or whomever, to give you a call and say, hey, we need help. I think you might be able to help us out. How does that happen?
Well, I think that somebody will tell them. They'll say, "This is a very unique firm. We don't know of any